Good morning, afternoon, or evening. I am Stephanie Joy with All Things Social Security and the attorney at Joy Disability. You're about to see what should be a question and answer format type of chat from our live session on a particular topic that we find that a lot of people keep asking about. So I'm sharing it here. If there are pieces that could have been added that weren't added during the live, because it's a kind of a fast-paced Q&A that we do every Wednesday at 1 p.m. You might just find that I added something to the end of it to give it a little more clarity and a little more details for those that are interested in that particular topic. So check to see if that's at the end. Otherwise, enjoy the video. Bye-bye. So if a person is disabled, regardless of when they prove it, if a person is disabled between the ages of 18 and 22, at some point in there, and it's continued on, and later on they don't do anything to defeat what would be a legal finding of disabled if they were able to prove it at the time, but we're usually going back in hindsight now. So now they're 35 and dad retires and collects Social Security. That adult child who has been disabled and never worked more than SGA for any sustained period and has medical proofs that he was disabled between 18. It could be when he was 10, but he has to no later than 22. Does he have to prove it? So I should say it that way. No later than 22. There's proof that he was disabled before age 22. He could get a DAC benefit, disabled adult child. It's an auxiliary benefit based on dad's record. It's awesome. Dad worked for it. Dad paid for it. And it's something that is extra. It doesn't take away from dad's benefit. It's just calculated on his work record. And it's one of the many different insurances that are in there that should it come up in your family, then we have this insurance can kick out. You know, same thing with spouses. There's different spouse ones and everything. So it's the exception to a child of a parent having to be under 18 or 19 to get a dependent benefit, because they recognize that a child who was disabled so young at some point before 22, they never really had an opportunity to earn a reasonably full work record and develop their own work history that they could then file for their own SSDI. And even if you can file for your own SSDI, it might be very low if you're disabled because you're part-time, you were never over SGA. So you can get your own, which maybe that's $500 a month, but then you can get, if dad's is $4,000, you can get $2,000 from dad, from his record. Now you've got, the $2,000 would take the place of what would otherwise be your $500. So it's a really good thing, and it also gets you Medicare. It's a recognition that, you know, young people that are disabled, super young, didn't get a chance to pay for their own Social Security insurance. You know, every parent wants to take care of their kids, so that's how that's done. Marocho says, I think we're on our last question. How adorable is your bird? I know. Hey, Tasha? Yeah. She's a character. Yes, she is. Today she's been up all afternoon. I thought she slept a hair, cooperating, listening, and being a very time. You know what? Because I fed her in the very beginning. Do you guys remember the one day it was a couple of weeks ago? She was being really obnoxious. She might have been up here. Right now I have her perched on my little table back here. And she was really obnoxious. But I hadn't fed her any kibbles, any treats. Let's see if she wants another one. Tosh, did you want a little cookie? I don't know. I don't think she's that hungry, because otherwise she'd be like, normally when she's hungry or she sees you eating and she's hungry, she'll say, cracker, cracker. And I think she's learning a couple other things. Like, you have to listen, you know, when they first saying something you don't recognize. I think she said, like, how are you? How are you when I go downstairs? She says night night when I go to bed now, because I turn off the lights. And like the other birds get a cover, because this is what we've always done. But when we adopted her, the lady said she doesn't like to be covered, so she's not covered. And she'll say night night. It's really kind of cute. And if you come down in the morning, usually she'll say, hello, hello. You remember that, Dimple? She was just like, because she'll walk really loud, and she'll say, hey, if you're eating something. And I wasn't eating in front of her, but she expects when she's in here to get treats from, you know, me, mom, or grandma, whatever you want to call me. You know, she expects to be a little spoiled. So when she wasn't getting it, she was letting me know she was not happy. So, but yeah, she's
Good morning. Happy Saturday. Just popping in here after running some fun errands. We went to a flea market this morning down on Route 33 in Saylorsburg, and that was kind of fun. Was able to support small business owners down there. But anyway, this is about a bit of the DAC issue and questions concerning people who may be eligible for DAC has been coming up quite a bit lately. So we have a few videos on different aspects of it, but I just wanted to drive home the basics of it. If there is a child who could now be an adult of any age, and if it is provable that that now adult child was disabled before the age of 22, and that doesn't mean he was collecting any benefits before the age of 22. It might be that he was disabled as a baby, toddler, elementary school, high schooler, but was not eligible for benefits because, number one, Social Security disability stems from one's work record, and he wouldn't have had one because it doesn't apply until people are over 18. And if he was unable to work, he'd never have gained it. Secondly, that if his parents or guardians were not poor enough, then because their income and assets, resources to some degree is deemed to him, the child, that child, despite being disabled, would not be eligible for SSI. If the child was from a family income and resource level that was beneath the maximum for SSI, then he would be able to have gotten SSI, and maybe he did as a child. And then, of course, when you hit 18, they now review the child on the basis of being an adult. So it's a slightly different, well, not even just slightly, quite a significant difference in the evaluation of whether they're disabled. Because now, as an 18-year-old, it's, are you disabled from all work, which is a different standard than childhood disability. So anyway, so either the child was getting SSI or the child was not getting SSI. And now the child is an adult, and there is a benefit that one may be able to get at some point in adulthood, if that's the case, based on a parent's work record. So if that now adult child is disabled and has been since before age 22 without interruption, then if and when a parent is either eligible for Social Security on his or her own record, such as disability, retirement, or if the parent passes away and a survivor benefit for anyone eligible would kick in, that adult child who has no work record of his or her own can now get what is called a DAC benefit, disabled adult child benefit. And that would be a percentage of the parent's primary insurance amount. So if the parent is still alive, it would be 50%. If the parent is deceased, it would be 75%. Subject, of course, to the family max, which we won't get into here. So it's really, really important. And I have another video on what parents of disabled minor children or a little bit older, maybe even 18 to, even in early 20s, get all that evidence now and squirrel it away in a safe spot. I would be getting all of the school records because those will oftentimes show a childhood if the disability stemmed from the young years. Sometimes people are born with a disability that's of quite substance. Other times it's something that occurs during the childhood years or the young adult years before age 22. But parents, you have to save that evidence now, even though it might not be where they could get a DAC benefit until they're 40. It really depends on when you will be filing for disability or retirement or, God forbid, pass away. But if you don't have the evidence gathered now, there's a very good chance that evidence is going to disappear. Medical providers have this uncanny habit of disappearing records after 7 years. And this is true even with digital records if the person is no longer a patient of that practice. And of course, every state has different rules, if any rules, on how long they have to keep them versus might want to keep them. So the onus is on you to gather those records, order those records, and keep them in a safe spot. I would, maybe you're going to have to keep a paper copy, but maybe have multiple cloud copies, maybe a couple thumb drives in the cloud, some sort of commercial cloud service, because and then let your child or whoever, if they have a guardian, know where that is, because when the time comes when that child can now have a benefit, they'll be able to prove it, because it's proving a past fact. A lot of times it could be proving something from 20 years ago. Okay. And a lot of the time, a child that could not get, say, SSI as a minor because of the parents had too much money, once they turn 18, assuming no parent has started them a big bank account, and you really need to plan not to do that. It should be all in special, perhaps, trust accounts that would not interfere with the child's ability to get certain eligibilities once they're 18. So once they are 18, they might be on SSI, because then they prove, if the child now is not getting deemed the monies from the parents. Once you're 18 as a child, the parents' income and resources isn't going to count for the child, which is great. because that's why most can get on SSI unless someone wasn't thinking and let them inherit a bunch of money that was free for them to use in any way they want, in which case they're not poor and they wouldn't get SSI because that's welfare, right? But for most people have this kind of all in mind, and the child now at 18 would be on SSI. The child will remain on SSI unless and until, he recovers, starts to work too much, SGA, you've got to read up on that. And then at some point would potentially flip over to DAC, disabled adult child benefits, once a parent's record kicks in for him, and presuming that DAC benefit would be more than the SSI payment. DAC folks, like all other disabled folks, can work, but they have to stick within the rules of the amounts and, of course, the work they do. You don't want that to be indicative of being able to work full time at something else or the same job. So you always want to make sure you get some good information about that with regard to the child, or if you are the child now, before you start working, be very careful. One thing to know about DAC. Now I think it's better than SSI because you don't have the thumb as firmly on your neck as you do with SSI. However, there's one big thing that people have to realize as a DAC recipient. Well, actually, there's two things. One is you generally cannot get married. Similar to SSI in that you can get married, and of course you can get married, but it's going to potentially affect your benefits. With SSI, the income or resources of the spouse will now be deemed to the disabled person that's on SSI. Because when we're married, we are financially responsible for each other. With DAC, you can't get married or else you will lose your DAC benefits unless the the person you marry is also a DAC recipient. There's been a lot of efforts to try to get that changed in some way because it just seems very inhibitive. So we'll see what happens with that in the coming years. But just remember, the marriage thing with DAC is a serious thing to consider, like it is with SSI. And the other thing with DAC is if you are working part-time and under the threshold, so the working is fine as a DAC adult. So you have your working income that's very part-time and you have your DAC benefits, and that makes for a much nicer life in various respects. You have more money, you have a better quality of living because you have more money, and you get out and about and you're productive, and it's all fine and dandy. Be very, 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 very careful about SGA, because if you go over SGA and you lose your DAC benefits, even if you then go under SGA and you no longer can work again, maybe your disabilities get worse, you can't go back to DAC. It's like once it gets cut off, it's like permanently cut off. I'm not sure I understand why that is. I kind of understand some of it, but I think there's some exceptions that it's very unfortunate. So you want to be very careful never to lose your DAC if you're going to be relying on your DAC. Now, one beautiful thing about working part-time when you're receiving DAC is that you're going to start getting those credits that might get you your own Social Security disability insured status, because now you have your own work record. Even though it's very part-time and under SGA, you could still earn those credits. So a DAC person might eventually get off of DAC and collect their own benefits. Obviously, they're not going to do that if their DAC benefits are more, right? So it really depends on how much they're working and how much the parent works, so that their percentage that they're getting under DAC and how much that is. It'll be comparison now, but just something to think about. But the big take home here is DAC. You have to be careful about your love life. You can't just go and get married without giving it a lot of thought and making sure whether you're willing to get off DAC and you're not going to go back on, or your beloved is also a DAC recipient. Okay, so take that home. And as things crop up with DAC, I'm going to try to make a little short video about it, because it seems like a lot of people are interested in the ins and outs of DAC, because there's a lot of people who, are eligible for DAC because their parents worked hard to buy that insurance, which is a wonderful thing. DAC is great. I love it. Okay, bye for now. Have a great weekend. Go to a flea market. It's very patriotic, these flea markets. All right, bye-bye now.